The perspectives shared in the following segment are based on analysis and interpretation, not official confirmation. We navigate the realms of what might be, not what has been declared. Tune in with a curious mind.
What happens when the hosts of a prominent American talk show attempt to challenge the man who portrays Jesus Christ on television? The result is truly remarkable. A profound demonstration of composure under pressure that left the hosts, including Joy Behar, speechless, humbled, and entirely unprepared for the outcome. Jonathan Roumie entered the studio that morning as a guest promoting his popular series The Chosen. He departed as something far more significant, a man who had delivered one of the most compelling defenses of faith ever seen on daytime television. And the hosts were completely taken by surprise before exploring this incredible moment that is captivating audiences online. It is important to recognize that what you are about to read is not merely another celebrity interview that went off course. This is the instance when a famous Hollywood depiction of Jesus confronted the skepticism of the secular media directly and dismantled every critique with such deep conviction that even the studio audience, many of whom arrived as skeptics, left with a changed perspective. This is the account of how Jonathan Roumie transformed an attempted confrontation into a moment of spiritual reflection. The View studio buzzed. With its typical pre-show atmosphere, audience members found their seats chatting excitedly about seeing their favorite hosts in person. The lighting crew applied final touches to the bright studio lights. Cameras positioned themselves carefully, ready to capture every moment of another episode of America's most watched daytime talk show. Jonathan Roumie arrived backstage with his characteristic humility, dressed in a simple but well-fitted suit. His appearance struck a perfect balance between approachable and professional. His longer hair and beard, maintained for his role as Jesus in The Chosen, gave him a distinct presence, yet his warm smile and gentle demeanor put everyone at ease. Stage managers and production assistants found themselves drawn to him, struck by an indescribable quality. There was a peace about him, a calm that seemed almost otherworldly. Amid the organized chaos of a television production, he had been briefed by his publicist about the show's tendency for confrontational interviews, particularly concerning topics of faith and religion. But Roumie, a man of deep and unshakable conviction, was not concerned. He had faced challenging audiences before. He had stood firm in his beliefs through years of hardship in Hollywood, through poverty and rejection, through moments when quitting would have been simpler than persevering. This interview would be no different. What Jonathan Roumie did not know, what his team could not have anticipated, was that the producers had specifically crafted questions meant to challenge, to provoke, to force him into defensive positions regarding religion, faith, and the controversial nature of portraying Christ. They wanted conflict. They wanted moments that would go viral. They wanted him to be unsettled. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Interview began on a cordial note. Roumie took his seat across from the panel, greeted by warm applause from the audience. Joy Behar offered a practiced smile, the one millions of viewers had learned could shift from welcoming to combative in an instant. Whoopi Goldberg gave genuine praise for the impact of The Chosen. Sarah Haynes asked about the challenges of playing such an iconic figure. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by laughter and apparent interest, but those familiar with the program recognized what was happening. This was the calm before the storm. Joy Behar had been unusually quiet during the opening exchanges, allowing her co-hosts to build rapport, create comfort, and lower defenses. Her notes lay before her like ammunition waiting to be fired. She barely touched her coffee. Her eyes followed Roumie with an intensity that suggested she was waiting, calculating, preparing. And then, just as Jonathan Roumie seemed most at ease, most comfortable, most relaxed in the friendly conversation, Joy struck. So Joy began, her voice taking on that particular edge regular viewers recognized immediately. She leaned forward, her smile becoming something more pointed. "I have to ask you about something that has been bothering me." She paused for effect, letting the tension build. The clip we saw earlier shows Jesus speaking up for marginalized people, the poor, and so on. That is the Jesus we love, right? The subtle emphasis on "we love" hung in the air like a challenge. Roumie nodded politely, sensing the shift, but maintaining his composure. But Joy continued, her voice rising slightly. Not everyone interprets that message the same way these days, do they? Religion in this country seems weaponized at times. As a man of deep faith, which you obviously are, does that frustrate you at all? All these people using Jesus to push their political agendas. The audience fell silent. The friendly atmosphere vanished instantly. This was not a question, it was an accusation disguised as an inquiry. Joy had just implied that faith itself had become toxic, that deep belief was somehow suspect, that Jonathan's own convictions might be part of the problem the camera captured. The moment perfectly. Roumie's expression did not change to anger or defensiveness. Instead, something remarkable occurred. His face softened, his eyes filled with compassion. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made everyone in the studio lean in unconsciously. You know, Joy, he began, his tone gentle, yet filled with absolute conviction. In that clip, we see Jesus taking to task the Pharisees, who had essentially perverted the law. They had taken faith and made it about the specificity in the letters of the law versus the heart of the law. They were following rules at the expense of the people those rules were meant to protect. There was injustice in that. He paused, allowing his words to settle. The studio was now completely silent. And anytime you see injustice taking place, Roumie continued, his voice growing stronger, Jesus is not going to be happy about that. So yes, when faith is weaponized, when it is used to harm, rather than heal, to exclude, rather than include, to condemn, rather than redeem, that is not the Jesus I know. That is not the Jesus anyone should know. Joy leaned back slightly, momentarily thrown off her script. She had expected defensiveness, perhaps a retreat into religious platitudes. Instead, she had encountered something far more powerful, genuine conviction, supported by thoughtful theology. But she was not finished, not by a long shot. But does it not bother you? Joy pressed her voice, taking on a harder edge, that you are playing someone that billions of people worship as God? I mean, you are an actor, you are pretending to be Jesus. Does that not feel a little blasphemous? Do you not worry that you are reducing the Son of God to entertainment? The attack was now direct, no longer hidden behind pleasant inquiry. Joy had just accused Jonathan Roumie of blasphemy for a paycheck, of trivializing the most sacred figure in Christianity for ratings and recognition. The other hosts shifted uneasily. Several audience members gasped audibly. This had crossed a line, and everyone felt it. But Jonathan Roumie did not flinch. His expression remained peaceful, his posture open and unthreatened. When he responded, his voice carried a power that made the studio feel smaller, more intimate, as if he were speaking directly to each person individually. Joy, I struggle to follow Jesus like anybody else who considers themselves a Christian, he said, his honesty disarming in its simplicity. The struggle is part of it, and I think God knows what we struggle with, but we are still challenged to do what he would do in those situations. He leaned forward slightly, his intensity increasing, without becoming aggressive. I actually believe that, not because it is convenient, not because it makes good television, but because it is true. And I think that belief, that genuine conviction, is what lends me credibility and authenticity in approaching this character. People do not respond to The Chosen because of great special effects or celebrity actors. They respond because they see something real, something authentic, something that speaks to the deepest parts of their souls. The audience was transfixed. Some had tears in their eyes, others sat with mouths slightly open, completely absorbed in what was unfolding. This was not mere entertainment anymore, this was something else entirely. But Joy was not finished. She had come prepared for a fight, and she was not going to let authentic faith disrupt her strategy. Okay, but let us be real here, Joy said, her voice laden with skepticism. You have people who literally think you are Jesus. They try to confess their sins to you. They ask you to heal them. Does that not concern you? Are you not worried about the psychological damage you might be causing these people who cannot separate fiction from reality? Sarah Haynes attempted to interject with a gentler question, sensing Joy was pushing too hard. But Joy waved her off impatiently. She was committed, now determined to expose what she perceived as the dangerous delusion at the heart of religious entertainment. I mean, Joy continued, her voice rising, you are making money playing God. You are profiting off people's faith. How is that different from those televangelist scam artists who sell prayer cloths and healing water? The comparison was devastating. Joy had just equated Jonathan Roumie with the worst kind of religious con artists, suggesting that The Chosen was nothing more than an elaborate scheme, exploiting vulnerable believers, the studio audience. murmured with shock and disapproval. Even Whoopi looked uncomfortable recognizing Joy had transitioned from challenging to cruel. But Jonathan Roumie's response was nothing short of extraordinary. "Joy," he said, his voice remaining calm, but carrying unmistakable steel, "now I am not Jesus. I am very clear about that. I remind people constantly my name is Jonathan, not Jesus. When people try to confess to me, I tell them nope, save it for the priest. Because I am not qualified to hear confessions, I am not qualified to heal, I am not qualified to save." He paused, his eyes meeting Joy's directly, unflinchingly. "But here is what I can do. I can point people toward the real Jesus. I can help them see that following Christ is not about perfection. It is about surrender. It is about recognizing that we are all broken, we are all struggling, and we all need grace. The chosen does not make Jesus smaller or more trivial. It makes him more accessible, more relatable, more real to people who have been told their whole lives that faith is about rules and judgment rather than love and redemption." The power in his words was undeniable. Several audience members were now openly crying. Even some crew members had stopped their work, drawn in by the raw authenticity of what was unfolding. Joy shifted in her seat, clearly feeling the room turn against her aggressive approach. But she had one more weapon in her arsenal, one more attack designed to expose what she saw as the fundamental hypocrisy of religious celebratism. "Let me ask you this," Joy said, her voice adopting a mocking tone. "If you were to have a cup of coffee with Jesus, you know, the real Jesus, what is the one question you would ask him? How did I do playing you on TV?" The question was meant to humiliate, to reduce Jonathan's faith to ego and vanity, to suggest his entire spiritual journey was really about validation for his performance. It was a trap, and everyone in the studio knew it. But Jonathan Roumie did not take the bait. Instead, he did something unexpected. He smiled, not with anger or defensiveness, but with genuine joy, and when he answered, his response left everyone in the studio stunned into silence. "How did I get it close?" he said softly, his voice filled with genuine wonder. "That is what I would ask, not because I think I got it right. I know I did not. I know I am just scratching the surface of who he really is, but I would want to know, in all my imperfection, in all my brokenness, did I at least point people in the right direction? Did I help anyone see even a glimpse of your love, your mercy, your grace?" He paused, and when he continued, his voice cracked slightly with emotion. "Because that is all this is about, Joy. That is all it has ever been about. I am not trying to be Jesus. I am trying to show people what it might have been like to meet him, to walk with him, to be challenged and changed by him. And if even one person comes closer to God because of the chosen, then every struggle, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt was worth it." The studio erupted, not with polite applause, but with genuine thunderous approval. People were standing now, some clapping, some crying, some simply overcome by the profound authenticity of what they had just witnessed. Even Sarah Haynes wiped tears from her eyes. Alyssa Farah Griffin nodded vigorously, clearly moved. Joy Behar sat back in her chair, momentarily speechless. She had entered armed with skepticism and cynicism, weapons that usually served her well in dismantling religious guests. But those weapons were useless against genuine faith backed by genuine humility. She had tried to trap Jonathan Roumie in contradictions and expose him as a hypocrite. Instead, she had given him a platform to deliver one of the most powerful testimonies about faith ever broadcast on mainstream television. But Joy was not quite done. Even as the audience applause faded, even as she recognized she had been outmaneuvered, she could not resist one final jab. "That is all very touching," she said, her voice heavy with sarcasm. "But at the end of the day, you are still just an actor reading lines someone else wrote. You are not a theologian. You are not a priest. You dropped out of high school. What makes you think you are qualified to represent Jesus to millions of people?" The attack was personal and vicious. Joy had just questioned Jonathan's education, his credentials, his very right to speak about faith with authority. It was the kind of elitist dismissal that had become her trademark, the suggestion that certain topics were only for certain people and actors who played Jesus did not make the cut. The studio fell silent again, but this time the silence felt different, dangerous, expectant. Jonathan Roumie's expression changed for the first time, not to anger, but to something more profound. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made the very air seem heavier. "Joy, you are absolutely right about one thing," he began, his voice steady and strong. "I am not a theologian. I am not a priest. I did not go to seminary or get advanced degrees in biblical studies. He stood up slowly, the movement commanding everyone's attention. The cameras scrambled to adjust to the new framing. But let me tell you what I am, he continued, his voice rising with passionate conviction. I am a man who was completely broke 6.5 years ago. I woke up one morning with no food, no money, no prospects, and no hope. I was on government assistance that had run out. I had tried everything in my power to make my acting career work, and I had failed at every turn. The confession was raw and vulnerable. But Jonathan was not seeking pity, he was building towards something, and in that moment of absolute destitution, I did the only thing I had not tried. I surrendered everything to God. Not the polite, comfortable surrender of someone who is doing fine and wants to do a little better. The desperate surrender of someone who has run out of options and has nowhere else to turn. His voice grew stronger, more powerful with each word. I said, God, you take this. It is in your hands now. I want whatever you want for me, because clearly I do not know what I am doing. And that very day, I experienced a financial miracle that did not make sense on paper. 3 months later, the chosen came along. 3 months, the audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. So you ask what qualifies me to portray Jesus? Jonathan's voice filled the studio, now resonating with unshakable conviction. I will tell you what qualifies me. I know what it is like to be broken. I know what it is like to be lost. I know what it is like to struggle and fail and fall flat on your face. And I know what it is like to experience grace that you absolutely do not deserve, mercy that makes no logical sense, and love that transforms everything. He turned to look directly at Joy, his eyes blazing with passion, but not anger. You are right that I am not qualified on paper, but neither were the disciples. They were fishermen and tax collectors and regular people with no credentials and no education, but Jesus chose them anyway, not because they were qualified, but because they were willing, not because they were perfect, but because they were surrendered. Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Jonathan was not finished. And that is what frustrates me most about this conversation, Joy. Not the skepticism. I actually appreciate honest skepticism. What frustrates me is the suggestion that faith is only valid if it is credentialed and academic and approved by the right institutions. That Jesus I know did not spend his time with religious scholars and theologians. He spent it with sinners and outcasts and broken people who knew they needed saving. His voice softened slightly, but lost none of its power. I struggle to follow Jesus every single day. I fail regularly. I get it wrong more often than I get it right, but I keep trying because I actually believe he is real, and I believe his message matters more than anything else in this world. Not because it is politically convenient or culturally acceptable, but because I have experienced his grace in my own life, and I want other people to experience it. To the studio was electric with energy. The audience sat transfixed, many openly weeping. Even the crew members had stopped their work, drawn in by the raw power of what was unfolding. This had transcended television. It had become something closer to a revival meeting. Whoopi Goldberg finally found her voice, clearly moved by what she had just witnessed. Jonathan, that was really powerful. I think we all. But Joy interrupted, her voice sharp with defensiveness. Okay, but let us not get carried away here. You are still making millions of dollars off this show. You are still a celebrity. You are still living a comfortable life while playing someone who told people to give up everything and follow him. Is not that hypocritical? The attack was desperate now, Joy grasping for anything that might undermine the profound testimony she had just heard. But Jonathan Roumie was not rattled. If anything, he seemed energized, passionate, alive with conviction. Joy, do you know why The Chosen is different from almost every other religious entertainment project? He asked, his voice carrying genuine curiosity rather than defensiveness. It is the first multi-season show about Jesus ever made, and it is completely crowdfunded. No studio wanted to touch it. No network thought it would work. So regular people, Christians and non-Christians alike, invested their own money because they believed in what we were trying to do. He gestured emphatically as he spoke. And every dollar I make from this show I am grateful for, not because it makes me wealthy, but because it means I get to keep doing this work. I get to keep telling these stories. I get to keep pointing people towards something bigger than themselves. The money is not the point. It has never been the point. The point is that God took someone who was completely broken and completely unqualified, and he used that brokenness to reach people who are also broken. Sarah Haynes jumped in, clearly trying to steer the conversation back to safer ground. I think what is so powerful about The Chosen is how relatable it makes these biblical figures. Can you talk about no wait? Joy interrupted again, her frustration evident now. She had lost control of this interview completely, and she knew it. I want to push back on something. You keep talking about grace and mercy and love. But what about accountability? What about the harm done in the name of religion? What about all the people hurt by the church? It was a fair question, but the way Joy asked it, with barely concealed hostility and obvious agenda revealed, she was not really seeking an answer. She was seeking ammunition, but Jonathan Roumie treated it as a genuine question worthy of a genuine answer. You are absolutely right to bring that up, he said, his voice filled with compassion rather than defensiveness. The church has hurt people. Religious institutions have failed spectacularly in representing Christ. I am not going to defend that or minimize it. He paused, his expression reflecting genuine sorrow. But here is the thing, that people often miss the failings of the church. Do not invalidate the truth of Christ when Christians act in hateful, judgmental, exclusionary ways. They are not being faithful to Jesus. They are betraying him. The Jesus we see in Scripture spent most of his time confronting religious hypocrites who used faith as a weapon to control and condemn people. His voice grew stronger, more passionate. That is exactly why The Chosen matters. We are showing a Jesus who ate with sinners, who touched lepers, who defended prostitutes, who challenged power structures, who prioritized people over rules. That is not some liberal reinterpretation. That is literally what the Gospels say. And if that makes some religious people uncomfortable, then maybe they need to reread their Bibles. The audience erupted again, this time with applause and shouts of agreement. Even Whoopi was nodding vigorously, clearly moved by Jonathan's words. Alyssa Farah Griffin looked like she wanted to stand up and cheer. Joy Behar sat silently for a moment, clearly recognizing that every attack she launched was being turned into an opportunity for Jonathan to deliver another powerful testimony. She had come into this interview expecting to expose a hypocritical actor exploiting faith for profit. Instead, she had encountered genuine conviction backed by genuine humility, and there was simply no weapon in her arsenal that could penetrate that combination. But Joy had one more card to play, one final attempt to regain control of the narrative and expose what she saw as the fundamental problem with religious entertainment. Okay, Jonathan, she said, her voice taking on a more measured tone, as if preparing for a decisive strike. Let me ask you something direct. Do you actually believe Jesus performed miracles? Do you believe he literally rose from the dead, or is this all just metaphor and mythology that makes for good storytelling? The question was designed to trap him. If he said yes, he would be exposed as a religious fanatic who believes in magic and superstition. If he said no, he would be revealed as a fraud who does not actually believe what he is portraying. It was a classic forced choice, designed to make him look foolish either way. But Jonathan Roumie did not hesitate for even a second. He said simply, his voice carrying absolute conviction, I believe Jesus performed miracles. I believe he rose from the dead. I believe every single thing the Gospels say about him. The studio held its collective breath. This was the moment when Jonathan would either retreat into qualified statements and careful caveats, or stand firm in conviction that millions of secular viewers would consider absurd. He stood firm. I do not believe it because it is convenient or comfortable. Jonathan continued, his voice rising with passionate intensity. I believe it because I have experienced miracles in my own life, not magic tricks or parlor games, but genuine divine intervention that cannot be explained by coincidence or luck. He turned to address the camera directly, speaking not to Joy or the panel, but to the millions watching at home. 6.5 years ago, I should have been homeless. I should have been destitute. I should have given up and moved back home in defeat. But the moment I surrendered everything to God, things changed, not gradually, not eventually. Immediately that same day, his voice cracked with emotion. And I am not just talking about The Chosen. I am talking about peace that replaced anxiety, purpose that replaced emptiness, hope that replaced despair. Those are miracles too, and if God can do that in my life, if he can take someone as broken and unqualified as me and use me for his purposes, then yes, I absolutely believe he can raise people from the dead. The audience was on its feet now, applause thundering through the studio. Several people were openly weeping. Even some of the crew members were clapping. The energy in the room had completely transformed from skeptical confrontation to something approaching a spiritual experience. Behar looked around at the audience reaction. With visible frustration, she had tried everything in her arsenal: skepticism, mockery, personal attacks, intellectual dismissal, moral accusations, and nothing had worked. Every attempt to corner Jonathan Roumie had backfired spectacularly, giving him another opportunity to deliver powerful testimony that resonated with believers and skeptics alike. Whoopi Goldberg, sensing the interview had reached its natural conclusion, tried to wrap things up. "Jonathan, this has been really powerful, I think. We all wait." Joy interrupted one final time, her voice sharp with desperation. "I just want to say one more thing, Jonathan. You seem like a sincere person. I genuinely believe you believe what you are saying, but do you not think it is dangerous to promote faith so aggressively in a pluralistic society? Do you not worry that you are contributing to division and intolerance?" It was Joy's final shot, her last attempt to frame Jonathan's conviction as something threatening rather than admirable. The suggestion was clear: genuine faith was not just wrong, it was dangerous. Jonathan Roumie looked at Joy with an expression of pure compassion. No anger, no judgment, just genuine love for someone who clearly could not understand what drove him. "Joy," he said softly, his voice filled with kindness, "I am not promoting faith aggressively. I am sharing my story. I am portraying a historical figure who billions of people believe changed the world, and I am doing it with as much authenticity and conviction as I can muster." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "You call it dangerous. I call it necessary, because the truth is people are hurting, they are broken. They are searching for meaning and purpose and hope in a world that seems increasingly chaotic and meaningless. And when they watch The Chosen and see a Jesus who loves them, who accepts them, who died for them not because they earned it, but because they are precious to him, that changes lives." His voice grew stronger, more passionate. "I have heard from people who were on the verge of suicide who found hope through The Chosen. I have heard from atheists who started questioning their assumptions. I have heard from believers who fell away from faith and came back home. I have heard from people of different religions who said they gained a new appreciation for Jesus, even if they do not worship him." He looked directly at Joy. "So is that dangerous?" "I do not think so. I think what is dangerous is a world where we are so afraid of genuine conviction that we dismiss anyone who actually believes in something as a fanatic or a threat. I think what is dangerous is cynicism that mocks faith without offering anything better to replace it." The final words landed like a hammer. Joy Behar sat speechless, her mouth slightly open, no comeback prepared for such a profound and devastating response. She had come into this interview as the predator planning to expose and humiliate a religious actor who she assumed would be an easy target. Instead, she had encountered something she could not understand and could not defeat: genuine faith, backed by genuine transformation. Roumie gathered his belongings slowly, deliberately. The interview was clearly over, and everyone in the studio knew it. But before he left, he did something remarkable. He walked over to Joy Behar and extended his hand. "Thank you for this conversation," he said, his voice filled with genuine warmth. "I mean that because even when we disagree, even when it is uncomfortable, these conversations matter. They force us to examine what we really believe and why we believe it." Joy took his hand hesitantly, clearly thrown off balance by his kindness in the face of her hostility. "And Joy," Jonathan continued, his voice soft but carrying throughout the studio, "if you ever want to actually watch The Chosen, not to critique it or analyze it, but just to see what millions of people are responding to, I would love to hear what you think, really, because I have a feeling you might be surprised." With that, he turned and walked off the set to sustained applause that lasted well after the cameras stopped rolling. He did not storm off dramatically. He did not deliver a cutting final remark. He simply left with grace, with dignity, with the same peaceful confidence he had displayed from the beginning.